listen to our program live or on demand, download the CBC Listen app or subscribe to our podcast. This has been an encore presentation of The Next Chapter. I'm Sheila Rogers. As always, thank you for listening.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
I'm David Ridgen, and this is The Next Call. In September 1996, Melanie Ethier disappeared from northeastern Ontario.
Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
And on this full day of the election campaign, a key pandemic issue is highlighting the differences among the parties. It's over whether vaccines should be mandatory or not. Marion Warnica has that story.
Rapid testing in particular, on a daily basis, can be very effective.
Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole says his party will not require vaccinations for federal workers. Instead, he's promising they would take rapid COVID tests daily, paid for by taxpayers.
That's going in the wrong direction, and it won't launch a strong recovery or secure our future.
Liberal leader Justin Trudeau already announced his party's plans to mandate vaccines across the federal public service by the end of September. And by the end of October, employees in federally regulated air, rail, and marine transportation will also have to be vaccinated.
We know this is possible. If we put our resources towards it, we would achieve this.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says his party would do the same thing, but wants to see it done by Labor Day. The Bloc Québécois says the federal government should have no say on the issue, calling it a provincial jurisdiction. Marion Warnica, CBC News, Ottawa.
Chief Mike Sack of the Savaganaggity First Nation in Nova Scotia was briefly arrested today for organizing an illegal fishery. Band members were fishing under ceremonial licenses but weren't permitted to sell their catch and instead were using treaty fishery tags to sell their lobsters. The dispute over fishing rights escalated last fall when a facility storing Mi'kmaq lobster was burned to the ground. An impending storm is threatening rescue efforts in Haiti following Saturday's violent earthquake. Nearly 1,300 people were killed and thousands of people forced from their ruined homes are now sleeping on the streets. Stephen D'Souza has more.
The recovery effort after Saturday's 7.2 magnitude quake in Haiti was always a race against time. But now, with Tropical Depression Grace set to bring hundreds of millimeters of rain, the situation is even more dire.
It first puts an additional pressure on handling a disaster in a very complex situation.
Jerry Chandler is director at Haiti's Civil Protection Agency.
My fellow citizens are sleeping outside and they might be impacted because of the rain.
Thousands have been displaced by the earthquake. Sir Sherry says they need 30,000 tents, while another man says the aid has been slow to reach them. The storm is expected to hit later today and overnight, bringing rain that could trigger flash flooding and mudslides. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is your world this hour. You can also listen to us live on your mobile device using the CBC Listen app. For CBC News, I'm Karen Howard.
Now the forecast for Winnipeg, mainly sunny today, windy and hot, high 37, partly cloudy tonight, risk of a thunderstorm, low 22. Brandon, sunny, local smoke, windy and hot, high 35, clear tonight, becoming partly cloudy before morning with widespread smoke and a low of 16. And for Thompson, cloudy today, slight chance of showers, risk of a thunderstorm, hazy and breezy, high 21, mainly cloudy tonight, slight chance of showers, risk of a thunderstorm, clearing before morning, hazy, low 12.
I'm Nala Ayed, and this is Ideas. Some people thrive on exercise. They find it enlivening or relaxing, sometimes even liberating. For others, exercise is more like hard labor.
Nothing can make you believe we harbor nostalgia for factory work but a modern gym. We leave the office and put the conveyor belt under our feet and run as if chased by devils. We willingly submit our legs to the mangle and put our stiffening arms to the press.
That's from an essay called Against Exercise. And while the sentiment may be strong, fitness is often a love it or hate it proposition.
So either we go for a run or we stay on the couch and watch Netflix or whatever.
I always put all into my workout sessions. I am taking my exercise to the next level.
I hate it. I hate it so much. In fact, there's probably 1,000 reasons why the gym is so monumentally awful.
I like it. It's better to me than not looking good. I'm willing to put in the time.
This divide and our reasons for resisting exercise are many and often depend on who you're asking. But in this episode, we'll go in depth on some cultural reasons for fitness ambivalence, starting with the influence of school. Here is Ideas producer Lisa Godfrey with Building a Better Gym Class.
A few years ago, some exercise psychologists at Iowa State University hosted a questionnaire online. They invited adults, people aged 18 to 40, to describe high school gym class experiences. More than 1,000 respondents weighed in, really weighed in. And those psychologists noticed something about the results. If you remembered phys ed fondly, you were more likely to participate in physical activity as an adult. But if you were miserable in gym class, not so much. People describe their fitness test failures, sports shame, change room humiliation. It might just affect us in an ongoing way. The finer points of these studies are always arguable, but we all do know these stories. There's something weirdly universal about what can make high school phys ed a bit of a nightmare. Take the adolescent experience of writer and editor Michelle Wu.
The time that it probably sucked the most was, during puberty when everyone's bodies were changing, and you just noticed that some kids just seemed to be athletic and others weren't, and they were playing the same exact games. I was very skinny, small kid. I was tall, but I felt like I was raised to be afraid of a lot of things. Like, I was afraid of balls. Whenever someone said, "Hey, Michelle, catch this," I'd be like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And I was just not coordinated. It didn't help that I had a younger sister who was the complete opposite. She was a great athlete, is a great athlete. She was on the college tennis team.
Michelle took phys ed during the 80s and 90s. She's moved on. She's an accomplished adult. But there are teenage things that you just can't forget.
Getting picked very last for a team, I can pretty vividly remember thinking, yeah, I'll probably get picked, somewhere in the middle, and then slowly seeing fewer and fewer people on my side and thinking, well, yeah, I'll definitely get picked before this person, and yeah, definitely before this person, kind of that whole experience of, hey, what's going on? And then all of a sudden, it's down to me, and the teacher's like, okay, Michelle, you're on this team, and the end. I also had the experience.
Last year, he published a journal article surveying observations by fellow professionals in the field.
It's called Everyone Matters, Eliminating Dehumanizing Practices in Physical Education. And I think some people would say, whoa, really? Dehumanizing? That is a pretty strong term.
It is a pretty strong word.
But Brian says it's the right word to describe just how demeaned and even erased some students feel about their phys ed class experiences. There are lots of factors that play into it, and ways it can be made better.
In recent years, we've had significant research that's talked about the importance of school climate in terms of positive school climate. Some of those aspects have included safety, they've included relationships, they've included teaching and learning, they've included the physical environment, which is something that I look at a lot in a organization.
Now, pop culture would have us believe there's just a single source of blame here. That stock villain of comedies, the sadistic gym teacher.
By itself, a basketball is just a round sack of hair, like many of you. But in the hands of someone properly trained in its use and skilled in its art, this ball can do great things. Oates, I can hear you wheezing from here. Take a lap. Lose the asthma.
These days, somebody like Billy Bob Thornton's Mr. Woodcock would be a total rarity, says Brian.
I'd probably say 99.9% of the physical educators are not that person. So I think we have to do a better job of sort of changing the mindset of how society portrays us, which is why, for instance, when someone says gym, I mean, if you ever want to get into a real robust discussion about 9 out of 10 physical educators are going to come back at with you like this is physical education and not gym.
Taken as a group, PE educators across North America still do tend towards the sports-oriented and also the male and the pale. Their students, on the other hand, represent a whole range of bodies and abilities, genders and sexualities, races, cultures, and religions. So there needs to be more representation, and teachers need to stay educated on their students' realities and inclusive of everybody. And Brian Culp says they should be aware of the history behind their curriculum.
We've looked at physical education just in a really separate lens from the rest of quote-unquote education. It's parallel to what we see with all the rest of our subjects. It's a very strict Western world ideal of health, sport, and fitness. And it places emphasis on white, slim, heteronormative, non-disabled, Christian, and fit bodies. And, you know, this is something that we talk about in our profession. Generally, when you bring this up, it's just like a dirty secret. Nobody really wants to really have a conversation about it because, again, we tend to think of physical education and we think of sport-based things. We don't really think about it in terms of, from a social standpoint, having people in a classroom that can learn about lifetime physical activity and health and how that particular classroom environment can shape people as they move forward and want to participate in physical activity. When you look at goals and standards for physical education in different parts of the world, particularly in North America, they don't mirror the goals of sport. That's the interesting piece of it. So the goals of what we consider quality physical education, particularly in Canada and the United States, are supposed to be about lifetime physical activity. They're supposed to be about physical literacy, but yet there's something that changes on the levels, the local levels, to where it is so sport focused. And sport by nature can sometimes be non-inclusive for everybody in that context.
Mm-hmm. In terms of what you've seen, say, in your lifetime, and when you first got into this field, have things shifted in terms of the goals and values?
Yeah, I think the goals and values of what physical education is supposed to be has shifted. I think what's happened, in my opinion, again, a lot of people, some different pieces on this, is that we've had it very focused on these aspects of fitness. I just in the past year was a co-author on a paper that discussed expanding and including standards that consider Black students and their experience in physical education. Because again, as we go back, we tend to just lump all students in one group and consider that they have the same experiences, and that's not necessarily the case.
He points out that Black students may be expected to have a naturally high level of skill and excel at sports because that's the racial stereotyping that gets applied. So, just like North American culture as a whole right now, there's a whole lot being questioned and re-examined about phys ed. And then there's another kind of divide.
I think, again, we have two different things. The people who make the decisions about what curriculum should be in schools, they're a little bit behind times, and they're only doing things from a standpoint to, make sure that we have testing in schools, not necessarily make sure we have the whole child included. And then I think you have the researchers and the people who are actually in physical education prep programs who are training in a really innovative way.
Though even that new generation of teachers sometimes has to be reminded of certain things.
one of the things that I do is train physical education teachers, like pre-service, what we call pre-service teachers. So people are going to be future teachers, and also train legal professionals, right? So that type of environment. And you will find in a lot of our experiences, people who are training to be physical educators have typically been very proficient sport performers. They have very proficient skills. Like, I rarely get students in my class who have no confidence in their skill ability, who wants to become an educator or physical educator. So, in terms of the training, they're coming into it from the standpoint of, and we'll look at students until we get that out of them. They look at students as, why don't these students know this? Their skills are just absolutely horrible. And we have to tell them a lot of times, it's like, well, yeah, that's what they're supposed to be. They're not supposed to be the best skilled right now, because that's your job to teach them. And of course, we have to recognize and think with movement, much like anything else. I mean, think about social conditioning and things such as that. So if you don't have access to certain types of opportunities in your community, you're at basically the mercy of what's taught in that physical education class, right? So one of the things that I always talk to students about is the fact, so I grew up in the South in the 1980s, and we didn't really have access to hockey. And